But probably like the most heartbreaking moment was when our oldest daughter was FaceTiming me, and she was like, "Mommy, I just want you to be home so that we can be a family."
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in today. Today's guest is actually a group member from my private Facebook group, and her story first struck out to me when she posted in the group about being pregnant during COVID. And guys, this was during the height of COVID when everything was starting to escalate and businesses were starting to close and people were quarantining. And so I could only imagine the stress and anxiety it brings to be pregnant during that time. Because then she posted about being in the hospital for 20 days straight because her water bag ruptured. So she shared just everything she went through. She had limited visitors. Her husband could come, but he was also taking care of their 3 children at home. So it was just a crazy time for her. So I reached out. I said, we have to have you on the show just because I know so many moms that are pregnant right now are feeling this extra stress and anxiety because there's different precautions right now with COVID, and there's different steps, different restrictions. So I wanted to have her on just to share a little bit about her story. So without further ado, here is Grace Peters.
So I kind of just want to just dive right in. Tell us first a little bit about you and your background and family, and then we'll kind of go from there.
I am a Southern girl by heart. I was raised in Alabama, but currently my husband and our family live in central Wisconsin, so there is snow on the ground. We just got dumped with it on Easter Sunday, about a foot. So very different from how I grew up, but we are here. My husband was a pastor until December, and then he resigned from that job, and we've kind of been in between churches right now. We have a 4.5-year-old daughter, and then a 3-year-old son, a 21-month-old son, and then an 8-day-old son. So our oldest is very motherly. She cannot wait for the baby to come home, and then the other boys are like, oh, okay, there's a baby. So anyway, yep, they've been, the other kids have been down in Alabama with my parents for the last week and a half. So they are coming back today, and I'm pretty excited for that.
So you spent 20 days in labor and delivery with a ruptured water bag. So can you explain a little bit what happened and what this means?
So I was kind of already a high-risk pregnancy. Our baby was IUGR, which meant that he was below a certain percentile. At one point, he had dropped to the 1 percentile. And so I was kind of already on a 2-time-a-week ultrasound rotation. And they were just monitoring him very, very closely. But then at 30 weeks and 6 days, I was experiencing some leaking, and I was like, well, I mean, usually my water would break first, and I don't usually contract on my own without Pitocin anyway. So I was just kind of watching it. So then the next day I went into the hospital and I took that amniosure test, which is kind of like a pregnancy test, and they confirmed like it was amniotic fluid. So at that point I was exactly 31 weeks, and they said, you're here until you deliver, like you cannot go back home. So they crammed me full with a lot of antibiotics just to protect me, to protect the baby. I was on 24-hour monitoring at that point for probably 4 or 5 days, because they needed to make sure that the baby's heartbeat was steady, and they were constantly checking my temperature, make sure there was no infection or anything. So kind of everything that could have happened would have just led to like an emergency C-section. But because the water rupture was so small, my body didn't truly know that it was in labor. So it just kept on producing amniotic fluid, and that baby had enough. And of course, with my ultrasound still every two times every week, they were still checking like all of the fluid around the baby, and they were like, he's pretty safe right now. So it was in one aspect, it was like there was nothing to do, and sometimes I was like, why am I even here? Like nothing is going on. But then on the other side, it was there was always like that sense of at any moment like something might happen, and I'm just going to be wheeled right away into the emergency room. So their goal was first get me to 32 weeks and then try to get me to 34 weeks. And we made it. He was born a day before I hit 34 weeks. So I basically stayed in the hospital. I was seated the whole time. I could get up, take a shower once a day, go to the bathroom, and then I just kind of stayed put, so that water bag wouldn't rupture anymore, because of course if it had, again, like emergency C-section right away.
So like, what were those like first moments for you when they told you like you're gonna have to stay here? Like,
yeah.
went through your head? How did you like manage to like stay calm during that time?
The first thing that went through my head was I should have brought my packed suitcase because it was at home, and I had already been in the hospital a few times with thinking my water had broken and it not actually have broken. And so I was like, this is what's going to happen again. Like, they're just going to send me home. So I had packed up my bag and then I just left it at home. So I had to text my husband and I was like, surprise, my water really did break and you're going to need to get me my suitcase somehow. Throughout the whole process, there was just a lot of prayer on my part. There wasn't, yes, the danger was kind of immediate, but I felt like I was in a pretty safe place, and it was just it was more so all of my mind was racing with what's going to happen with my husband and what's going to happen with my kids back home, because I'm not there to like put everything together and then say, here's the plan and now let me go back to the hospital and everything's like in order. And I didn't have that opportunity. So there was just a lot of praying and texting my husband and saying, this is where this is and this is where this is, and let me try to find childcare if I can from the hospital. And even the doctor mentioned, he was like, you're doing pretty well, for just having had received this news. And I was like, well, because the pregnancy was kind of high risk, like this was always a possibility that I would deliver early. I thought it would be more because the baby was in a dangerous position gestationally and they would just need to come in and take him. I didn't expect my water to rupture, but it was kind of always in the back of my mind, so I had kind of prepared myself in case something like that had happened. So I was able to kind of there was nothing to do. There was no reason for me to go crazy. So
That's a good way to put it. You also mentioned, like, especially with this being during COVID, like there's different hospital restrictions.
Mhm.
So the only visitor you're allowed to have was your husband, but he was also taking care of your 3 other kids, working full time, taking school. So like, how did you guys manage that, and how was he able to eventually come in and visit you?
So he is just actually working part-time right now, but he teaches online through VIP Kid, which is like a teaching English as a second language to Chinese students. So because of their time difference, his work hours he could open them up for whenever they're open, but he would work often in the evenings after the kids went to bed when it was morning in China, and then he would work very, very early in the morning when it was evening in China. And probably the first week was really the hardest because he had already scheduled later morning meetings because I was supposed to be there to wake up the kids and to get them ready. So we ended up having to find some childcare really, really early. We dropped the kids off at like 5 or 6 a couple times. That was still really before the COVID stuff kind of was sinking in. So people were a little bit more willing, especially like if they had kids themselves. They were like, yeah, just bring your kids over. It's fine. He really held down the fort here and was with the kids almost every day, all day long. If he did come over to visit, it was mostly the maximum of 2 hours. Like it was a very short visit every couple days usually, and he would bring me like new clothes, take my dirty clothes back and do the laundry and stuff. But he really maintained stability. And yeah, the first few days were rough because he didn't know the kids' schedule, and he doesn't know like where pantry stuff is, and just like the stuff that I'm so used to doing every day because that's my job as a stay-at-home mom. And now it was just like pushed on him, plus entertaining 3 children under 5. But he's just a very stable, steady man. And so he reworked his schedule as much as he could so that he did earlier classes. Like he would get up at 4 sometimes and be teaching until the kids woke up, and then get them breakfast and get them through their day. One blessing was the week that I was admitted, the school started providing lunches for everybody because they weren't in session, but they understood like some kids still need lunches. So my husband was just able to go and get lunches for the kids every day, and it kind of got them out of the house safely, and he didn't have to worry about trying to come up with a lunch for them. And then we had, our friends here who did say they could watch the kids sometimes, and that was really kind of them to be able to do that. And they would take the kids for a couple hours, or they would come here, and then he would drive over every few days to be able to see me. But yeah, he was the only one. Kids definitely were not allowed. No other adults could come. It was all very, even the nurses were like, this is really strange. Like, we're so used to having visitors walking the halls all the time, and it's just kind of dead. So it was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, I can't imagine like how that would be in such like a moment when you rely on other people to like come by you,
Yeah.
help you out. So how was it for your kids to like understand? I know you said your youngest is 18 months or
21, yeah.
months. So yeah, like how did they understand what was going on, or like how did you guys kind of work that?
Yeah, I think really our oldest was the only one who truly understood, like, mommy's at the hospital and she's staying there for a while. The other kids would say, well, the youngest doesn't really say much, but he would be excited to FaceTime me. But then the middle boy would just be like, Mommy, I really miss you. I'm like, I know, bud. And then he would go off and play with his cars. But probably like the most heartbreaking moment was when our oldest daughter was FaceTiming me, and she was like, Mommy, I just want you to be home so that we can be a family. And I'm like, we are a family. And she goes, no, we're not a family until you're home. You have to come home. And it was just, she was like, all I want is to be a family. And we had worked a lot with her on teaching like the importance of family time, as opposed to always just getting stuff. Like, it's a blessing that we get to be together tonight. And she was like, well, that's not special. Like, where's the food? You know? And so we were teaching her that. And then she kind of understood better, like, oh, it really is a privilege to be together as a family. And so she probably had the hardest time with my being gone, but it was still an opportunity, like even over FaceTime, to be a mom and to explain to her, like, this is what God wants for our family right now. And mommy's in the hospital because the baby needs to be safe and mommy needs to be safe. Like, it was still a teaching opportunity for her, whether she really understood it completely or not, just to be able to have time that I could explain there is purpose behind this. Like, it's not a waste. I didn't leave you on purpose. You know, I still love you so much, but we've got to keep the baby safe. Mm-hmm. So, and they did pretty well. Their kids are resilient.
Okay, so how amazing is Grace, guys? I mean, I even just feel so much more relaxed after hearing her talk about staying calm in the hospital and just really focusing on her purpose and focusing on, you know, what she was there to do. And I just thought it was so cool to hear her frame of mind during that time and how she just kept positive. So it was just a really cool lesson to remember as well. So I'm going to share part 2 next week. And next week we talk a little bit more about gratitude and how she kind of flipped the script. How instead of being in the hospital and kind of saying, oh, woe is me, like this sucks, this is awful, she flipped it around and said, how can I get the most out of this time? She had meaningful conversations and connections with nurses and just really looked at how she could fulfill her purpose every day. So I just was so inspired, and I thought it was just so cool to hear from her. So thanks for tuning in today, guys, and I will see you next week for part 2.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. It should be down here somewhere. We release new episodes every single Wednesday, and if you're not following us yet, be sure to follow us at Mommy Knows Best on Instagram. And remember, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you are a great mom. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next week.